Hello, my name is Freddie, and today I'd like to talk to you about some of the research that I've conducted over my time on the Master's course here. Here's a little history of my work to provide context, and then we'll get stuck in. Previously, I made work involving caricatures and cultural icons which consistently pop up across cultural histories throughout the world. Examples of these are the thief and the judge. I would explore the depth of these characters and find meaning behind them and how they reflect our society. I became fascinated with these caricatures and created performances, video art around these characters. However, now I've moved on to another character, a character with a much larger scope, the storyteller. Every society has one, and they hold an incredibly important role in the creative process and development of culture. In my current work, I'm exploring who is the storyteller, how that changes the story, and the portrayal of the narrator, author, orator, or writer. Here are some examples of my work. As you can see, I've done a lot of work in text. This is a medium I have not worked in much before, but I'm finding a lot of success in. The video games I am creating are easy to interface with, and can pack a significant punch. Some can even be quite funny. I've also been working in video as well, as you can see here. The recurring theme that I keep coming back to is the cyclical nature of storytelling. How most stories have a beginning, middle, and end, deal in similar themes, and often convey a narrative to explain the same content all throughout history. I'm quite bored of this, and I think it's incredibly dull to do the same thing repeatedly. My work is a critique of that. Additionally, I have begun developing the skills required to create actual visuals for a video game. Here's a short working example of a role-playing game I'll be using to explore a similar idea, as I mentioned previously. But that's not why you're here. You're here to learn about the research I've done. Well, to start with, let me introduce you to two people, Harrison and Wood. This artist duo, based out of Bristol and Liverpool, are British contemporary artists who have been working together for many years. They deal with issues like the body and liminal space, but the bit that I'm interested in is how funny their work is. I went up to meet them recently in Bristol, and I was blown away by their sense of humour. The witty banter and shrewd witticisms connected the final piece of the puzzle for me. They were so funny, and therefore their work was equally as funny. I've been studying their work for some time, and I've learned a lot about their practice, and it's helped me develop my practice. However, the key part for me is how they use comedy to communicate. I've watched comedy all my life. I find that comedians have a special way of communicating with an audience. This is a theme that I will continue to build on in this video. The idea that making something funny is a more powerful vehicle for communication, and using a variety of forms to do this. Harrison and Wood are examples of slapstick comedy and physical comedy. To further reinforce this idea of the communicative effects of comedy, I present Doug Fishbone. He teaches on this course, and as a salesperson, he understands the value of creating a funny but informative presentation. A lot of his practice is indeed this. And this is another example of how making something funny is a more effective method of communication. It helps to engage your audience better, and it keeps interest high. I have integrated what I have learnt from them into my practice. The methods of storytelling through subtle and overt comedy has taught me the distinct methods of communication in the same way a painter has their own style of painting. Guy Oliver was the proverbial nail in the coffin, as he made me realise the style I like. He too makes amusing artworks. He primarily works in video art and produces high quality videos. However, it's the inclusion of himself, the artist, that stands out to me. It's the use of personality and the artist's own image that intrigues me. I find it fascinating how so many artists reflect themselves in their work, but also include themselves in their work too. This ties in very nicely to the theme of my work, the self-referential, cyclical cycle we find ourselves in as creatives, the tautological loop which we seem to never be able to escape from. I enjoy artists that engage with this, and I also enjoy critiquing this through my own work. If you want to start talking about self-referential artwork, then John Smith might just be your guy. Working in film also, he created very self-referential film where he would pretend he was the director telling people what to do. However, these were simply videos of real life, and he acted as if he controlled it. He turned footage of the everyday straight into a piece of controlled media through the use of narration. He imposed the motifs of the writer and the storyteller onto the media and made the narrative seem apparent where there was none. I found this not only fascinating but hilarious, how the introduction of a storyteller can so drastically transform perspectives on something so mundane. Now moving on to some research, I've got a quote here from Gregory G. Reck about narrative anthropology. There is a story told by anthropologist Gregory Bateson about a computer which, having been programmed to respond exactly as a human would, was asked by the programmer how it could be determined that its responses were actually those characteristics of a human. There was a pause and whirring of spindles before the computer finally responded with a tape which began. That reminds me of a story. Stories are inherent to humans. We live and breathe storytelling. Everything we do at this university is in some form an aspect of narrative creation, communication, or the embodiment of that. For me, this idea is pivotal because I feel like we can all understand how stories connect us. Our world revolves around the narrative we tell about it. Now, regarding research into the idea of originality and how some of the stories we tell these days are, the same as stories we've ever told, I've got a quote from Mark Twain. There is no such thing as a new idea. It is impossible. We simply take a lot of old ideas and put them into a sort of mental kaleidoscope. We give them a turn, and they make new and curious combinations. We keep on turning and making new combinations indefinitely, but they are the same old pieces of coloured glass that have been used throughout the ages. Now, because we all love stories so much, and we all tell stories so much, it means there's a lot of stories. When there's a lot of stories, you often cover the same ground quite a few times. The original idea was something that was lost a very long time ago, and even still inspired by something, so not wholly original. However, recently I've been distinctly annoyed about how no one really seems to be trying to tell a different story. I understand it's hard to find originality, however, better to try and fail than to never try at all. In my opinion, there's a distinct lack of attempt to make original content, and this drives me mad. Now, don't get me wrong, storytelling has evolved and changed. We've upgraded in the last 200 years, and we now have so many new ways to tell our stories. Pamela B. Rutledge wrote an article on Psychology Today, where she discussed transmedia storytelling. And she said, transmedia storytelling is very exciting, but it isn't new. It is the ultimate mashup of ancient traditions and new communication models. There have been stories and messages delivered across different media ever since the Cro-Magnon man figured out that mineral pigments, like iron oxide and black manganese, could be applied to the side of rocks and caves, whether chronicling life, communicating with others, or creating an inspirational image. There were stories being told. Media technologies have come a long way since cave paintings, and have so many new capabilities that the orchestration of a story across multiple media platforms can be a complex creative endeavor. We have so many more ways to tell story these days, with film, audiobook, augmented reality, or even virtual reality. The way we tell our stories are greatly unrestricted, and through modern innovation we can tell so many new, fascinating stories. However, even now, we seek to tell the same ones. Superman is essentially Jesus, but with a modern flavour, who is almost the same as Robin Hood. The cycle of characters with new flavours all seem to be the same. And I want to say it's because of human nature that we do this, but I'm not sure. I think there's more to it than that. Now here's a quote from an article discussing main character syndrome on TikTok. In psychology, main character syndrome is described as being, well, it doesn't actually exist as a diagnosable mental illness, at least not in the DSM. As it turns out, main character syndrome exists only in the overactive and healthily deluded minds of the internet's many self-identified protagonists. But while the main character syndrome, a situation wherein people think of themselves as the top-billed star of the feature film that is their regular lives, might sound like a kind of distorted sense of reality that the digitally adverse boomers warn everyone under the age of 30 about, main character syndrome is also an important coping technique, and it's how we've collectively chosen to process this past year, evidently referring to the pandemic. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I think this article might be onto something. I think a lot of the technology that has developed, rather than connecting us to others, has forced us all to look internally. The story is now about ourselves more than ever. The stories we tell are comfortable. They don't seek to be different or meddle with the balance. Those things that were groundbreaking back when film was first made have become the norm, the status quo. I do worry my issues are somewhat short-sighted. I know true cultural change takes a long time, but it still annoys me. But it still doesn't really stop my confusion and interest. How aren't we bored with the same story over and over again? Are we, as humans, so self-obsessed to only desire what is known, relatable, and understood? Where are the good old explorers pushing the boundaries? I will say that memes are definitely doing better these days. They're so fast evolving. The normal narrative of jokes and stories they tell are brilliant and easily become outdated so quickly, minus all the racism and feeding sexist ideas and right-wing ideology. They're so fast developing, they have such a short half-life. The turnover is incredibly fast, and I think has led to a lot of interesting developments. Anyway, back to it. So, to summarise, the way my work has progressed, the way it is progressing, and the way I've been leading it has been angled towards an exploration of the storyteller in a contemporary context, how this has been transformed by modern technology, and making funny jabs at repeated patterns, motifs, and the cyclical pattern of storytelling we seem to always find ourselves in. My intention is to satirize this, and also produce funny stories which in turn comment on their own story, making them quite meta or self-reflective. I hope this has been informative to you, and I hope you have all enjoyed it as well. Any feedback you wish to give, feel free to email me or just talk to me. I'm sure I'll be around. And if you think I'm a genius who deserves all the funding in the world, a PhD, and a lifetime supply of ice cream, feel free to email me as well. I'm open to all inquiries. Thank you. Peace. This was a mega weird thing to film, and I've enjoyed it as a process. I'm not even sure if I've done this right, or if there even is a right way to do this. I've tried to explain my ideas to you, and what I've done, how my thoughts work, like a sketchbook. But I'm not sure if that's right. There's a self-obsession in art which weirds me out. And I hate it. so I make work about it. In every story there's a storyteller. Even now.